Hey everybody, this is Brent Ingersoll and you are listening to the Speaking Of podcast. Today my guest is a guy named Jock Hiltz from Halifax, Nova Scotia, a good friend of mine. And then my friend Anthony Moore, who's been on the show many times and will be on many more times. Today we have an interesting conversation talking about media, talking about social media, digital media, the information age and how it influences everything about our lives right now. Super interesting conversation and I think you're going to enjoy it. So here it is. My conversation with Jock and Anthony about the information age and navigating media. Welcome to the Speaking Of podcast. We are back. It's a podcast that's all about an evolving list of topics, just whatever we want to talk about. And I've got an evolving group of guests who are generally my friends, and that is who is with me here today. I have a familiar face with me here, Anthony Moore, in the studio. Yeah, looking like he's ready to. You could be on the bridge of some kind of starship.
And there is enough.
Hey, Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc.
Yeah.
Warp speed.
That's right.
I feel like that starship though. It's not clean enough to be part of like the Enterprise.
Right. This is definitely Star Wars land.
Yeah, you're in Mandalorian territory there.
And it's cluttery enough that it's actually appropriately a studio.
Yeah.
Just don't be the guy in the red suit when you go down to the foreign planet. All right.
That's right.
They never come back.
No, they don't. They don't. The guy in red.
I don't watch Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Yeah. No, I used to watch Next Generation a little bit with my old man every so often. So I got a little bit of the next gen in me, but beyond that.
I believe those guys were affectionately called the disposable extras.
Yes.
They were. It's always the new guy to the left in the red suit. Who's he? How did he get to go with the captain?
That's right.
Expendable. No, I'm more of a, as you know, I'm more of a Star Wars guy, as you know. So
there we go.
Oh, it's Jurassic Park. That was T-Rex.
Oh no, that was definitely your standard TIE fighter.
That's your standard level.
I think the Foley guy in Universal Studios uses the same sound effects for the T-Rex and the Starfighter because that sounded like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park.
It could very well be. Actually, those sound effects on the T-Rex for Jurassic Park is intense. Like that. Yeah. That'd be fun actually to be part of the
Foley guy.
Team. It's a Foley guy. That's what it's called.
Foley, yeah. Foley is the sound effects and all that stuff. Generally, when you watch a movie, 90% of the sounds you're hearing have been added in, like footsteps, door handles, wind blowing. Sometimes voices, they get dubbed over in studio because there's too much background noise and they got cut out. So
even like
magic in movies, nothing is.
Sometimes when you see a dialogue in a movie going on, you see someone's back to the camera. You can almost tell that's been spoken back.
Overdubbed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great because sometimes their mouth is the jaw is not moving, but they say something, or you'll see it moving, but it's not to the word you're saying.
Yes, I do notice that once in a while. Which, hey, you have a keen eye for these things, Jock, and you're my other guest here today, my other friend here today, Mr. Jock Hiltz. Yes. Glad to have you on the pod, my friend, and I hope we can do many more. Even with where this discussion, I want to have a discussion with you guys today because we've talked about these things before, and I think these are things that more and more people, especially believers in the Western Hemisphere, I think this is a global conversation really now, which is interesting. But I want to have a conversation around media, the information age, social media, big tech, all the information age conversation is a conversation that Christians should have already been having. But I think in the last handful of years and then amplified and magnified in the last few months, more and more of the average kind of Christian who's not like a media nerd, like yourself, Jock, in the sense of you work in the media arts, you're involved in that with your day job, and then Anthony's got some background with big tech even, so yeah. But the average person like me who's just like out here trying to do their life is starting to feel more alert to the force of nature that is it's actually it's not a unified force. The torrent of forces that are the information age And I think more Christians are waking up to the fact that, hey, what do we do about this? Because, you know, for me and my journey, I go back to, you know, before I never really took seriously the influence of media or what I'm listening to or watching or the news or even social media when it first came out. I didn't really take that seriously. But then in like the first presidential election with Donald Trump, I remember watching that unfold, and literally, I'm not stating any political agenda. Just as an observer from Canada, which all three of us are Canadians. If we have Americans that are listening or watching, welcome. But as three fairly, you know, as three Canadians, and for myself, as I'm watching it as a Canadian unfold, this was the first time that I felt like maybe this growing underlying suspicion that I had of, hey, perhaps the media, especially like the mainstream media, aren't quite 100% above board. And maybe there's some ulterior motives going on. And maybe everything they're telling us isn't exactly true or real. And then I watched it kind of unfold. And even election night, I'm watching CNN and I'm listening to, you know, well, I should back up. You know, you watched as the primaries are happening with Donald Trump. And every gate that guy, you know, passed, he wasn't supposed to. And the story that you're getting from the mainstream media, with the exception of Fox News, I'm sure we'll talk about them, but actually Fox weren't even on board with Trump at first.
Yep.
So we can lump them in there. The story you're getting early on is that this guy doesn't have a chance. This is such a joke. And then over and over again, he starts breaking through these barriers. And by the time of the final night of the election, you know, I start paying attention. I think many of us were, and we're like, okay, there's obviously a pattern here. Maybe he could actually win this thing. And so I'm actually watching the election unfold and watching on CNN and hearing them say things like, well, Trump seems to be leading here and here, but we still have a chance. And I remember actually hearing them say, we still have a chance.
Yeah.
And being like,
that's
wait,
huge.
aren't you the news? What are you talking about? What's this we?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm actually rooting for Trump just to see, again, not in the political way at all. And I don't have any intention today in our conversation to get political, just observational. I'm rooting for Trump just to see what they do if he wins. And I mean, the bias of the anchors was absolutely on display.
It sure was.
And the agenda of CNN, for instance, was absolutely exposed when Donald Trump won that first election.
I actually think
I remember.
Keep going. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just
Go ahead,
wanted
Anthony.
I just wanted to say I think I recall actually someone mentioning World War III election night. Like there was like
Sensationalism.
They like literally they were forecasting like the end of the world in short order, and I was just like, okay, wow, you're saying something here that I'm not sure everybody's listening to, because there's lots of people who believe you, and there's lots of people who aren't listening to you, but you're saying something here, and anybody with like a discerning sort of eye should be going like, whoa, wait a second here, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
losing you there a little bit.
Start to get into following politics, and I love that we jumped right in there because
you're good. You're good. We got you.
I started following a few years ago because I was tired of being the country kid who knew nothing about what was going on in politics. And what caught my eye and really made me think, okay, the news isn't necessarily news, was during I think it was Hurricane Katrina. Was that the one down in New Orleans?
Yes.
The devastating hurricane. Yeah. And Anderson Cooper was down there doing things are horrible. And he's standing in the water, like up to his waist or past his waist. And then, I kid you not, you can look it up online. He's talking about dogs are lost and stray and like losing their homes and stuff. And you literally see a dog 6 feet in front of him walk by in like ankle deep water. And then he walks out of the ditch to pat the dog and then goes back down. And then you can look online. There's photos from his crew of like him crawling back down into the ditch to waist deep water when the water around was like a couple inches deep. And I'm like, if they're willing to lie about that, what else are they willing to lie about?
Yeah. And, it's obvious that, I mean, and I think the average, and this really is, I mean, you know, I'm coming at this from a pastoral standpoint, and you guys are both, you know, highly influential, involved believers in King's Church, but then we're coming at it with a pretty average kind of layperson opinion in many ways, just trying to have a conversation about it. And I think one of the factors we've already said here, and Jock, you make such a good point, is, you know, they're angling the story in a certain way, and that already tells us that there's a reason why Anderson Cooper wants to be waist deep or chest deep in the water and not ankle deep in the water. That's so and most people already have the assumption that, I think maybe that we don't think it runs as deep, but most of us assume that, okay, that might be a factor. Then you know, so Trump gets in, and then he starts spinning, you know, because he say what you want. And again, I'm not trying to get political here. I want to say, you know, whether you're behind Trump or not, one thing you can't say about that guy, and if you say this about that guy, I actually think it says more about you, is that he's stupid. That guy is schooling people as far as what he wants to see happen, over and over again. And so he's flipped the script and leveraged. He's actually gone back the other way against the media, like coining things like fake news, and basically just uses that. Like, it's either his response to everything coming at him is, it's fake news, it's fake news, it's fake news, which also, I think you're sleeping if you think that that's 100% genuine as well, because it's just not. And
he was brilliant. Because I believe every blunder he said and all the rhetoric and the stuff that people hated him for, I think he was very strategic with it, because what happened was, all through the preliminaries and all through the primaries and all through his presidency now, literally 110% of the media is Donald Trump. And even Hillary's platform, Hillary may have won if her platform wasn't based on just trying to discredit Trump. If she actually put a platform together that people wanted to vote for. But even now, it's just everything is just bad mouthing Trump, and people aren't stupid. They don't want that. Like, really, like it's fun for a couple of minutes to watch it, but then it's like, no, we need more than just people who are going to just try to tear someone else down in order to further themselves. And so,
and he's judoed that thing, right? Like, he's actually every time those pieces go, he flips that in his favor and says, there they go again. There's the fake news again. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong either. I'm saying that to say, we are all waking up to the fact that there are these things going on, and people are using, like, we're getting caught in the crossfire of political agendas, of industrial agendas, like economic agendas, where, you know, you have these major media outlets. We're getting caught in the crossfire of like systemic agendas, in that, you know, Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube are steering their agenda with the analytics and with how they allow their platforms to be used. And so I think
you're even seeing now within that, like Twitter, like, I don't know if you guys follow Sean Foyt, fairly well-known worship leader. Like, he's now getting his posts, like he's really big for going into communities and just with worship, and that's his whole thing. And he's now getting his posts of people worshiping and praying for each other are being blocked with statements saying this does not follow the code or conduct of our you know, Instagram, etc. And it's like, how is it we're at a stage where peaceful prayer and worship of people coming together in unity is being blocked, but bricks through a window and people being beat in the street and rioting is full forward going, like, all fair game? And it's like, as Christians, that's kind of worrisome. I mean, you're flipping out of just media and into kind of, like, dare I say it, end times, but like the oppression of the church, where here in a free society, the media has the power to kind of drive these type of narratives where, like, worship is being blocked on a public forum, but rioting is not. And it's like, it's kind of scary.
Yeah. Some of these ideologies that are being not just promoted by, I think, a lot of the agenda of the media, but it's actually being like it's being propelled. Like you gotta, I hope we start as Christians start waking up. And again, I don't think the answer is we kind of combat politics with politics. I'm not really, that's not really how I think, but I think we at least need to wake up and become aware of, you know, what is actually happening as, you know, you start like right now, like as of the time we're recording this, you know, there is a movement that it's gone beyond Black Lives Matter and like the statement and the sentiment, which I am all for, to there is now a, you know, there's a Black Lives Matter movement and organization that's a whole different can of worms. And
$1 million organization, multi-million-dollar organization.
And what they stand for, there's some really questionable things for a Christian. And there's these agendas anyway, kind of rolling out away from us where, I mean, you really listen to what is happening. Like right now they're protesting, they're saying STEM is racist. That STEM, like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are racist. You're racist if you use math. You're racist if you like not use math, but what they're saying is that these systems that are promoted to advance science and technology, engineering and mathematics are inherently racist. And like, dude, I think we're starting to see, like, we can't just watch that stuff happen and not like take notice at the least. And
I think honestly, and one of my greatest frustrations, there are actually a lot of frustrations, but like one of the specifically about this is the fact of how many people I'm sort of looking at all this stuff going on, and I'm like, does everybody see what's going on? Because I hear a lot of people talk and I go, and it's like this, when I hear you say, use the touchstone of the decade, right? Donald Trump. When you use Donald Trump and you say, and I hear you talk about him, I know the voices you're listening to. I know I can make really quick assumptions about what you're listening to, whether for or against, right? I know who you're listening to. And I can also tell people who have a balanced approach, whether you're saying, well, I like certain things and I don't like certain things. And that's certainly where I would say I would fall, because there's lots, and again, like from a governmental, from a political, I understand that, like, I don't want to, it's as easy it is for me to get sucked down into the quagmire of politics. I understand that the kingdom, and from a godly perspective, there's a higher calling to that. But I also say that I do think it's important that people wake up and start to critically look at what voices they're listening to, what they actually allow from an information perspective, because I think the veil, honestly, I would love the veil needs to be pulled off for more people, that there is an agenda, but between what you're getting fed social media wise, what you're being fed in the news, what you're being fed, you're looking at, I see it all the time. I see slant, I see agenda, both ways, both ways, conservative and liberal, I guess, left and right. It's actually not conservative and liberal. It's actually left and right.
Yes.
But from that perspective, I'm reading slant. I'm reading this idea of like this thing that's feeding into confirmation bias, meaning that if I think a certain way, I'm going to automatically look for things that actually feed and validate that certain perspective and worldview.
Yeah. Maybe I can say it like this to help kind of frame our discussion is, and this is really why I wanted to just have this for anybody who's listening or anybody that's part of my church or beyond. Like, the reality of today is so there's more information coming at the individual than there ever has been in the history of this planet. Like, just there's more volume. And I think most people are waking up to the fact that we can't just objectively trust the information that is coming at us as neutral, or that there's not something else going on. And so the reality is, these main information platforms that all of us deal with every day. So you have your kind of your mainstream TV and internet media companies they're out there, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Fox News, they're kind of the ABCs, CBS, these major media conglomerates. That's one of the kind of the platforms that we have to deal with. And then you get into the internet component where you have your social media information that's coming at you. You have your Twitter, you have your Facebook, you have your Instagram, you have your MySpace.
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 ICQ is burning hot.
That's right.
MySpace got canceled. So you have that platform as well. So we recognize these platforms that we're dealing with. So you have your mainstream media, you have your social media, and then you have your like big tech companies that are driving, that are way more influential than I think we think they are, like Google, like Facebook, once again, because they're bigger than just this social media platform. You have your Amazons of the world, even Apple, like these companies, Microsoft. You have these companies that are really steering so much of what's coming at us. They're kind of the means. But then behind the means, so here we have the means. Then behind the means, I think what we have to come awake to is that these platforms, whether it's the news, whether it's social media, whether it's our web browser, these platforms that we oftentimes are under the blind assumption that they're there for our use. Here's the crazy thing I think we're waking up to. We're actually there for their use.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I think that's the subtle shift that I think we need to start to understand is those platforms are means or mediums that political, economic, and ideological forces are using.
Yes.
They're using us with.
It's curated information.
Yes.
Right. It's all, and I would argue to some degree it's kind of always been that way, but I think in today's day and age, I think it's being revealed as such more than ever. Like it's curated and controlled information.
Just have more access to it.
Yeah. And yeah, for sure. And I think in a good way, the internet is in it good and bad because, you only had, 50 years ago, you had 3 channels and a newspaper, right?
Yeah.
So you may only get one perspective on something. Now it's more of a choice. Now, if you're looking for it, there are other perspectives on the same, we've seen them all, right? We've seen them all. Here's one picture about a protest that says one thing,
yes.
And here's one picture from another source that says exactly the opposite, right? And we've seen those. Actually, you remember that you've seen that clip about the people, the news anchors who are saying, we here at this, we value yada, yada, yada. And they go off on this rant. And then it turns into like the same speech rehearsed and regurgitated by like 100 different newscasts.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Mainstream.
That one. Yeah. So
yeah, I've seen that clip. Yeah.
Right. So it pans back and all of a sudden it's this chorus of these people regurgitating the same thing, right? So it's curated and controlled like never before, but you have to be looking for it and you have to sort of be aware of it and to know what you're looking at. And I actually think we can no longer afford to actually blindly ingest information without some degree of skepticism.
I think so. And it's a sad thing to think about that we have to kind of live skeptical like that. But I think that is the world we live in where we are being pushed around by agendas that I think a lot of the time we're oblivious to, and we're just kind of going along with, and we think that it's not really there. And I think the last maybe few months, I think it's confirmed a lot of our suspicions the last few months for a lot of us. Like for myself, I would never, probably this time last year, I would have never envisioned myself having a conversation like this. I would have said, let's get out the aluminum foil and make helmets.
Man.
That's right. If you, and that's the other amazing thing. It's like, if you question kind of the mainstream, you're automatically coined conspiracy theorist or tinfoil hat guy. It's like, no, I'm a free thinker where I'm like, I'm going to look at everything. And like, I love the point you made, Anthony. Like 50 years ago, we had 3 stations that shut off at 9 p.m. and 1 newspaper. And so like you would hear, even as a kid, it'd be like, you'd hear one tragedy in the world maybe once a month something will come by, there was something in the world happening.
Yeah.
And now it's like every minute you can find something new. And I think it's with the phrase, you've probably heard it before. It's the world's not actually getting any worse. We're just seeing a lot more of it. And our phones have given us the ability to hit every single tragedy as it happens, play by play, regurgitate it over and over and over again. And it, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, it goes beyond just what we're consuming, but like it affects mental health, and it affects, because if all you're consuming is doom and gloom, that wears on you. And I think the lockdown period we've gone through has amplified that, because all we've had were these.
Yes. And it's just I think more people are aware of it than ever. And you're seeing a couple of things, like I was maybe a little bit suspicious over the last several years. Like I talked to you about just like sort of this journey I've been on since watching Trump come into office and be like, wait a minute. And then, like I remember last year, I don't know if you guys saw that or not, when I did a Facebook Live last time there was a provincial election, I think it was. I just went on the record and just said, hey, here's my conscience as I'm voting. And I talked about abortion, and I talked about some kind of taboo, maybe right-leaning Christian conversation that needs to happen. And 3 different times that night, within the run of an hour that I was on Facebook Live, my audio got just stopped. And like one time I'm like, maybe it's coincidence, but it was like every time I was getting into some taboo zone, and again, do I think there's some man behind my computer, like editing? No, but I do think that these platforms are optimized to keyword, as soon as you say the word abortion or you say the word Trump, or like it's triggering things.
Algorithms, my friend.
Yeah,
algorithms. Hold on, let me just put my tinfoil hat on.
Well, hey, but it's flat Earth theory. Yeah.
Oh. That's another podcast.
It's another one. That's not going to be on the Speaking of podcast.
No. It's interesting though. I was doing a little bit of research before coming on here, and I don't know if you remember a few years ago a picture of Prince, one of the princes. I don't know if it's the older two, the one that married Kate. William. William. A picture of him came out stepping out of his limo, giving the crowd the finger. Do you guys remember that picture?
Yes,
and
I
then
remember that one.
Another picture surfaced, and he was actually holding up 3 fingers. And I found out, sugar, I'll send it to you. Maybe we can throw it in a post. But it really, I loved it, because there was another one of a picture of a lion holding its cub, and then from the other side, it looks like it's biting its head off.
Right. Yeah.
And it really does. I think it plays into this whole how much power the media has, and why I think as Christians it's important for us to think bigger, but be aware of what we're listening to, what we're following, and how easily we accept what we see. Yeah. Because there's always 2 sides. Well, there's usually 3 sides to the story. Your side, my side, then in the middle there's the truth somewhere. Yeah. And it's just really. I think we underestimate the power. Go for it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You said like the power of the media. So there's the power of these platforms. First off, I think it needs to be talked about, and then the power of the controlling principles behind, or principalities even behind, these platforms. But you have, for instance, anytime there's an authoritative voice coming through an authoritative platform, it causes us to assume they're telling us the truth. But I mean, we just watch, and it's interesting because I think this happens in Canadian politics too. It's just, we get more actually inundated. Again, for our American friends who are listening, we get inundated with more American, mainstream
news, than we do everything
Canadian.
Canada's Prime Minister again?
Canada got its
Putin.
It's Lenin, isn't it?
Lenin. John,
or
Vladimir Lenin. Yeah.
But we get inundated with a lot. But anyway, we just saw, I saw this 2 weeks ago. Anthony Fauci, the spokesperson as the COVID thing's gone on with, to the United States with how they're tackling it. He's their kind of medical authority. He's their Jennifer Russell for New Brunswick. We have Dr. Jennifer Russell. Everybody's got their spokesperson.
We have Dr. Strand.
Dr. Strand? Oh, it's almost as cool as Dr. Strange.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. So yeah, ours has been great too. And I think Anthony Fauci is a good guy from what I could tell. But so he's on record saying, now we encourage you to buy and wear masks when you go out in public. And he said, we told you, at first that it wasn't necessary to wear a mask, quote, because there was a mask shortage and we wanted to ensure that there was going to be enough for medical workers. So literally, he's on record saying, we as the governing authority gave you misinformation in that we told you it wasn't necessary to wear a mask, which that's false information. And he said it was, so that you would behave a certain way. You would not go out and buy all the masks so that medical workers wouldn't get them. And that should make your hair stand up a little bit. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the intention. Medical, my wife's a nurse. I want her to have that stuff before me.
Yeah.
So, but that's not the problem with this. The problem with this is there's a clear indication or a clear instance of the government and the authoritative voices that are coming at us on major platforms telling us misinformation in order to control our behavior.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we should be aware of how calculated that is.
Yeah.
We don't even think the intentionality of even probably every word or at least every phrase of how that's worded, right? Literally knowing that this reporter is going to take this a certain way and this reporter is going to take this another way, right?
Yeah. And I think this comes into advertising. Advertising is an industry that companies spend. It's $1 billion industry that is super effective. And I remember at one point in my life where I'm and I think we all do it, even with, everything that's going on in the media, we accept the fact that the media is powerful. The media controls narrative. The media has X, Y, and Z, but I'm smart enough not to get caught up into it. I can see past it. We have that self-complex. And I remember and with advertising, I noticed it with, remember the Wish book?
Yeah.
That was mainstream media before the internet. And we're advertising. Yeah. But how many hours did you spend circling and pining over the different items that were strategically laid out in different orders? And even now it's Instagram ads and the power of suggestion. Brent, you throw a photo up if you got a new pair of Air Maxes on. I'm dang, I think I need a new pair. Mine are looking a little scuzzy. And it's
that goes the other way usually. I see your Air Max. Hey, I should get a new pair.
But I mean, it's now you see the Instagram ads, and I don't know how many things I've bought from the Instagram ads just because I'm oh, yeah, that's cheap, and I was thinking about that the other day.
Or here's the crazy thing. Let's get the tinfoil hats on.
Yeah.
I said Air Max to my friends, and I would not be surprised if on this thing this afternoon, I see a sponsored ad showing me Air Max shoes because we had this conversation, and this friggin' thing is listening to me
constantly. Yeah.
I know.
Again, put the hats on because we're.
But we've all listened,
and
that's true. No,
that's one example that everyone's experienced.
But it happens infrequently enough that it gives you enough. I think they have it tweaked.
A little bit of a doubt.
Yeah, a little bit of no. And it happens so infrequently enough, it doesn't happen every day. It probably happens once every whatever X number of days where you go, hey, that's weird. Or you might not notice it, or at least you go, huh, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
And then just leave it at that, right? Because listen, trust me, I've tried to set to set it up so that it would do it and it wouldn't do it. But it happens over and over again. Right?
Yeah. I was in a hardware store. Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was in a hardware store and I was looking at this. I was only looking at it. It was this patio top propane fireplace that was Bluetooth controlled. It had you can control it Bluetooth wise. I just walked by and I looked at it and I said, that's cool. And I kept walking on by. Literally that afternoon, I scrolled through my phone. It's an ad for that particular.
No.
So, yeah. And I think in that instance, it was actually, they had the Bluetooth. No, guys, for real. I'm being honest here. Serious. It was the weirdest. But no, that one actually had a Bluetooth transmitter because spitting out information so that you could actually tag onto it with your phone and control it. But it picked it up and it got the ad. And the first thing when I opened up my browser was an ad for that actual model. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's how it works. And I mean, stores are getting wise like that too. And like that whole concept of, harvesting that's not even sounds sinful hat worthy, but like tracking our keystrokes and where we go, because you see it, you search something. Christmas is really bad because you search something for your spouse, and then next time they go in the computer, it's like ads and ads and ads for it on the sidebar. And it's just that's just simple analytics and algorithms tracking keystrokes for advertising. But at the same time, it's like, is that an invasion of privacy? And it's like, that's the power that the media has. Like we let it into our house every time we say yes to the terms and agreements.
Correct.
Right, that we don't read, and I'm not really proposing that we start. I think the biggest.
They're 80 pages for a reason.
for real. Probably we probably signed our lives away hundreds of times at this point. But I just it's important that, like, if this conversation does nothing for us other than says, like, you know what, we're not crazy to have these thoughts, because everybody listening's experienced some version of, I literally was having a conversation about that just the other day or just this afternoon, and now on my computer or on my phone I have an advertisement coming at me. And so we've identified that we know that the government and authoritative voices utilize media to influence, at very least, I'll hedge on the word control, but influence behavior.
Correct.
Know that is happening. We also know unequivocally that with this stuff that companies are capitalizing on our movements. They absolutely are. They are paying for information that every time you punch something into Google of interest, it's sending companies information on, like, this is what Salesforce does. Right, like
$1 billion industry.
Yeah, I mean,
for a reason.
Actually, one of our pastors, our pastor of our PEI location, we should have him on this next time. He used to work for Radian 6, who sold themselves. So they sold to Salesforce, and that was all that was. It was optimizing Twitter information to find like sales habits of your target audience, and like that's what they're mining information, literally. And so we know that's happening. And I think the third thing we can identify, so controlling or influencing behavior, they're capitalizing on our movements. And then the other component is they're monetizing attention, right? Like, that's what the news are doing. That analogy, like, there's a reason why, and I think I said this in a sermon last month, like, if it seems like it's mostly bad and critical news, it is.
Yeah.
That's all they're saying. Like, if you go on CNN, everything is breaking news. Everything is hyper alert. Everything is bold black and bold red letters. Yeah. Because human beings, and I think I said this in my message, I heard I think it was on the Freakonomics radio show. They were talking about how, and again, I'm not trying to crack open a conversation about, do we believe in 6 literal days or evolution and all that. I don't really care for our purposes today, but it was from the perspective of an evolutionary biologist saying human beings have been conditioned, the fight or flight, mechanism in every human being has conditioned us to pay attention to threats. Yeah. Like, that is why you can't help. And we all know this to be true. If I insult you, that's what you're going to go to bed thinking about tonight, not the 10, 20, 30 compliments you had. You're going to think about that one negative thing. Yeah. This is why the comment section in Facebook is so popular. Someone says something wrong on the internet, I got to fix it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that's deep in our DNA, is I need to focus, or I can't help but focus on the threat. Yeah. And if you don't think that the mainstream news, which is a business, aren't catering everything to your fears, I think you need to wake up to that. Well, fear sells, and that's just bottom line. Like you said, news outlets, media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all your favorite ones, they're a business, and businesses are about their bottom line, profit margins, and that's it. It's gone are the days of unadulterated truth and facts. Is what, like, in the old Spider-Man movie cartoons, where it's like, Peter Parker, you get out there and you get me a real picture of Spider-Man. This one won't do. Those days are gone. It's like, those days are gone. It's like, we get a blurry image that can be narrated in some way. That's being sold as the truth. And it's because
That's what sells. And I think this is where also it's so important for us as Christians to view everything back to the Bible. And I think like through the Word of God, and really because with this whole social justice thing coming in, and emotionalism and feelings coming in, and let's be honest, we like to hear stories that fit our personal narrative, where it's like, this is where my convictions lie, this is what I have passion and heart for, that's gonna draw my attention. And I think that's why as Christians we need to be like, so especially in these times, so word based, and everything gets filtered through the cross and through the scripture, so that what we hear and what we filter through what we see is getting caught there, rather than, oh, that's really bad, that person should have done that, get rid of that, and just jumping on that bandwagon of whatever the movement is.
There's something that you're saying there, Jock, and I think one of the things is that we, as specifically as Christians, need to be aware of what our heart is doing, because there definitely is this way that it's like it's cancel culture, right? Like if I see someone doing something and someone disagrees with them, and someone says they're a bad person, then not only are they a bad person, but everybody who agrees with them or tries to support them is now a bad person. And that's not kingdom. That's actually not kingdom. And I could disagree
mob mentality.
with them. I can disagree with them, but if I start to hate them, then that's bad. Right? If I start to hate them and I actually start to treat them differently, not as it's the same. Honestly, it's the same thing. It's all over the place. It's like the cancel culture is as destructive as racism, right? Like it is 100%. It very much is, from a kingdom perspective, when you like, it's evil and it's demonic in nature. And it's absolutely something that as Christians need to be vigilant and mindful of, that if my heart starts, like if I'm conservative and I see somebody on the left is painted in a negative light, and everybody who supports them, right, whoever that might be, is there is something that wants me to hate them. And go the other way around. If I'm liberal and I see Trump supporters and all of those people, and I denigrate them and I start to see them as the enemy, that's not kingdom either, right? So it's like this thing that divides and seeks to, not only are you a bad person, but everyone who supports you. And that's a narrative that's actually being sold largely on you could find that on either side of the media, either side of the ideological media.
I heard a quote.
Go ahead.
I heard a quote a while ago, and I love it. And it comes back to really why, as Christians, we need to get a foundation, a stronger foundation in the Word, and through what the Word of God says versus what we feel, what our heart says. Because the quote I heard and I loved it, it said, if I had a friend that treated me the way my feelings treat me, I wouldn't want anything to do with them. Because our feelings, you guys know what it's like, where it's like one day you could be at the top of the world, and in 2 hours you're in the basement pit feeling like everything's falling apart. And it's like your feelings ride the roller coaster of life, or of what we consume. Like, oh, I'm just going to go on my phone for 2 minutes. Next thing, an hour goes by, and then you walk away feeling like, that's the end of it.
I heard it said that feelings make great servants but terrible masters.
Yes.
And I think we get that flipped a lot of times.
We do. And I think that's, slipping into church culture and carnal Christianity, and even the Instagram world of how things look is an indication of how things actually are. It's so driven by just heart warm feelings. And if that is in place, then I'm good as a Christian. Things are good as a society. My church is doing well. Our numbers are up. Everyone's smiling. Have you seen our Instagram account? The photos are amazing. So what do we do when we look at where we're going somewhere? We check out how good does their social media look, because that's to us, that's an indication of how good the service is actually going to be. And it's really, I think that's a topic that I would love to talk about, media within the church. If we shift gears a little bit.
Let's.
I don't know if you guys are ready to shift gears or not, but like,
I want to do 2 more steps before we're done. We'll land the plane here shortly. But first thing is like, okay, we've only scratched the surface, but we've at least sort of pricked the bubble of this problem that we all face. It's a problem, and it is a reality that we all need to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah.
And the only way to escape it, escaping it isn't an answer. Because the only way you're going to escape it is if you go off grid, and I mean off grid, like
and
that.
Then you'd be really putting the hat on.
Exactly. But then, how do you make disciples of nations if you're the only one on the island?
We can't.
Come on.
We can't. So you can't, even if you're not a Christian, realistically. Like, none of us want to give up
Our comforts.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, but as a Christian, especially, we're called to beyond comfort to mission, and so flight is not an option. The silver or the tinfoil helmet's not going to help us here. So what mindset is, like, I guess, like, how do we, I guess a couple of things to talk about is, like, how do we, for the person that maybe is just like listening and this is the first time they've ever thought about it, maybe even at this sort of low level, again, we're not getting too deep into the rabbit hole here, but how do we navigate the fact that you basically can't trust anything coming at you for what it is?
Yeah.
I have to read into everything. Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is just understanding how much power that the media can, how much influence that what we consume, period, can have on you, whether it's a newspaper ad for a pair of sneakers on sale, or if it's a deep political debate coming at you, pre-election. Like, there's power there. And I had a client, I delivered a project, delivered it to them, and they came back and they're like, it's just not hitting me. Like, something's wrong. Like, basically, I'm not digging it. And I'm like, okay. So I went back, and all I did was change the song. Literally took the track out. It was just like a highlight music video type of thing.
For our listeners that don't know, Jock creates videos, works in media.
Yeah, a production company, and I get to do a lot of fun stuff like that. But this client, all I did was I changed the song. Literally, no imagery changed, nothing. It's just a different song. And she called me up in tears, like, this is it. And like, she's bawling through this production. And all it was a song change. And it's like, that's the influence, and that's how emotionally attached it. And as a creator, that's kind of like the power. And I think even like from a church as a pastor, especially now that we're online and it's a bigger scope, it's like, that's the power we have of, like, that's the emotional control. And I think that's a responsibility that you as the face of a church that speaks live, is like, how do we navigate authenticity versus emotionalism, and not leveraging extra lights and extra sounds and extra whatnot to push emotionalism to make you think you're actually encountering God or you're actually experiencing something real, versus emotions being tickled.
If, like, the reality is you can't trust what's coming at you because of the intentions of who sent it, and you can't trust what's in you and your ability to objectively receive it. And I think, like, that's the kind of, quandary or conundrum of all of this is like, you're subjective with your emotions and your own filters, and the information coming at you is subjective in their own filters and their own reasons. And so I think the thing that you make a great point, Jock, about, like, the church not only taking responsibility for the fact that we are using these forces too, and like, even from a communication standpoint, like, there's a reason why we bring the music, we bring the soft piano in at the end of a message, like, and that's not necessarily bad. It's just
in and of itself, it's not bad.
It's just a thing that you need to be aware of. And I think my job as a pastor, and our job as part of King's Church, or any Christian for that matter, is like, my job as a pastor is not to tell you what to think; it's to teach you how to think.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I want to be able to equip my church and equip us as people to be able to think biblically, to think critically, to think with the mind of Christ, and to be able to navigate these things for themselves. Like, I think there's too much coming at people to, like, things are too complicated and too like crazy to just say, well, what does Pastor Brent think? Or what does so-and-so think? I think we need to learn how Jesus thinks. And
I think this is, and I think this is, again, coming back, like, it always seems so cliche to say, as a Christian, go back to the Bible. What does the Bible say? Because that's what you're inundated with as a kid. But really, those are the fundamentals that it's the only way you're going to stay navigated through this. And you think about it, it's like you start going through love your God with all your heart, all your soul.
Yeah.
If you do that in and of itself, you start establishing self-worth. You start establishing identity in who you are in Christ. Then you start loving your neighbor as yourself. Then those two alone I would put money on would remedy 95% of this chaos that we're experiencing in society. It's just establishing yourself in Christ and who you are, and then loving each other as you love yourself and as God loves them and loves you. Like those two key points would shift everything.
Can I just read this? This is the one place I landed on today, just sort of thinking about it, was I just want to read Philippians 4:7-8. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And 8 says, finally, so related, but not necessarily, it's related. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And I'm like, that is the foundation. And I just, even as I'm saying that, I feel like a shift, even out of
tinfoil hats melting away
out of the tension of like our conversation, because I think even what you're saying, Brent, is that what you were saying earlier is that we can't control. There are certain things that we can't control.
Yeah.
What we can control is the gate, right? We can say, nope, not today. I'm not listening to this, right? Because I know what it does to me. I know how it makes me feel. It makes me depressed. It makes me angry. It makes me whatever. And I was just, I remember, like, I think it wasn't that long ago. It was in the last week. I sent, I think I sent Brent and Dan a text and said I had to turn off social media at like 9:00 this morning because it was just too much for me. And I know that, and it's not, I don't know. It's just, I gotta be willing to admit my own vulnerabilities, because I have things that I feel strongly about. And when I see conflict and I see it not going that way, it weighs on me. And so,
read the start of that verse again, Anthony.
7.
It says, let the peace of Christ guard your hearts and minds.
It says, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus.
Yeah. I think there's a yieldedness though we have to allow that to happen. I think that,
for sure,
that's the power of recognizing these forces that are going on, and like, you're under the influence all the time. The question is of what, of who.
Correct.
And that's an interesting point, Anthony, where you're like at 9:00 you had to stop looking. I went through that same 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was in this where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get off social media because I love it. I love those political rabbit holes. I love going down the tinfoil hat area.
If you don't follow Jock Hiltz on Instagram, our meme game is on the Mount Rushmore.
It is.
I've not given up that element of social media, but it's the same thing. It's like, you literally, what do? We wake up, we reach for our phone to check the time, and then we flip open our favorite social media news outlet and see what's happening. And literally that starts the tone of our day. It really does. And again, flipping back to a cliche thing that one of our Christian uncles would have said when we were a kid, start your day off on the right foot, consume the word, spend time with God. Like it's so simple. Like, you hear terms like the simple gospel. It's like, it really is that simple. It's just to fill your mind with light versus chaos, and your day will be accordingly. And I think that's really the key for us navigating this world of influence and media and power and everything, is just, again, being founded in what we say we are. And I think this is one of those, separating the sheep from the goats. We're coming into times where it's like, there's going to be a separation, and there's going to be people who get it, and there's going to be people who get swept up in it. And it's harsh to say, but
I think it's happening in the church already. I think
I agree.
Right now it's getting harder and harder to straddle, the
Sanitarian line. Sanitarian? Is that the word?
I think people are having to choose, okay, you know what? I can't have a foot in both camps, and I need to stand on the word and stand on, so like, I'm going to yield myself to what the authority of the word says, what Jesus has to say, or I'm not. And I think it's getting harder and harder to like align the
Yeah.
21st century Western culture with the culture of the kingdom and the value system of the kingdom. And I think it's a good thing. It's these
Yeah, they're just
conversations
getting
are
farther
causing
apart.
us to have to say, you know what, there's an increasing gap between the reality of the kingdom and the reality of the kingdoms of this world. And the Bible tells us that the enemy is the ruler of the power of the air,
Mhm.
like that. These systems that you and I, the air we breathe, like the media systems, and like these are not under the ultimate control of Jesus. The cool thing though is we still have, as of today, freedom to access these platforms. And yes, I do think there's some steering and optimization for
Censorship, we'll say. We'll
yes,
blanket it there.
I've had it done to me, but
Mhm.
there's still we still have a voice. And I can choose that Jesus has control of what's here and what's
Yes.
here and what's coming out of here.
Yes.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing we need to realize is this could be a very discouraging discussion if we just left it at
Yeah.
we're basically screwed because we have no control over our
Everything you look at's trying to control you.
yeah, over everything that's coming at you. You have no
Yeah.
control over, and you can't trust your own ability and your feelings. You can't
Yep.
trust your feelings in it. And so that could be very discouraging. Or it could be, again, that gap could say, you know what? This sets me free. I'm going to stop trying to dissect this
Yeah.
thing and control this thing.
Yep.
And I'm going to yield
Yep.
myself to, it doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter if it sounds right or feels right. I'm going to actually lean into a biblical worldview, and I'm going to try to filter the information coming at me through the mind of Christ. That's why it's important to read your Bible. That's why it's important
Yeah.
to educate. Like people throw that, oh, you need to educate yourself language around. Like, yes, I would encourage somebody to not just assume that what the one conversation you have with one person is authoritative. You need to do some digging to get any semblance of truth out there.
You do.
But realize even our educational institutions are shaping the dialogue. They're shaping the agendas. They're shaping the culture. And so I think this is the time for the church more than ever. We should be Bible scholars, man. Like you should
Yeah.
know your Bible. You should have that. You should have it in your mind and on your lips and in your heart.
Mhm.
Like we should just have it all the time. And I think one of the big things for our church moving forward is like, I don't want us to be biblical hillbillies.
Yeah.
Like in that, like in the uneducated, like I don't want us to be, the Clampetts of biblical education. Like I want my kids to know the word. I need to know the
Yes.
word. I want our church to know the word, because that's the only hope that you really have on maintaining your mind.
100%. And especially in now, churches have gone online. The lockdown has really accelerated that. But we've had, everyone follows their favorite Christian leader, worship leader, pastor, whatever. And we have to realize that even if we're hearing our favorite pastor speaking to us, not just to take every word they say as gospel. It's like it's important for us to have our own relationship with Christ, our own study, where it's like we're not just being nourished by what people say and spit at us, because they're wrong. People are people, and people get it wrong. And I'm not saying they're wrong all the time by any means. I've gotten some really amazing gems and life-shaping times in my life through other people's teachings, but it's like, make sure that what someone says doesn't become your gospel, because that's a dangerous spot to be in.
Right.
Be very careful what comes up first when you Google something. Like I've had many people message me about this church or this Christian leader or that Christian leader. And you can find, man, you've got to learn how to dig a little bit. But the biggest takeaway, and you guys, I think I've said this from the pulpit, don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Like if you just come in here, I hope you can trust me. I hope you can assume that I've done my due diligence. But at the end of the day, you need to learn how to read the scripture. You need to learn how to allow the Spirit of God in real time to speak to you, and not just assume that the voice that you're hearing from the pulpit or from the news anchor or whatever it is steering you.
It's the pastor.
You have to, you have
Yep.
to learn how to think for yourself. And that's one beautiful benefit of this time though, is I think, if we think about our kids, we all have,
It's exposing a lot, and it's highlighting.
yeah, well, we all have young
Cut out.
kids though. And I think we have the opportunity right now to raise a generation. I mean, the three of us, we are in that interesting season of, we're old enough to remember pre-internet,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
but we're young enough to be fully immersed in it.
Yeah.
And
And we're parents of young children, which adds a completely different dynamic.
Correct.
Which
it does.
and like my wife and I, we are so intentional. We have one 7-year-old who is all about media. He's all about energy and running and just having fun. And it's like our main goal is we make sure that periodically through the day we have touch points with him.
Yep.
Where we instill the word with him. We instill listening to God and asking him what he's hearing. And even if it's like right now, it's like, buddy, what do you want to pray for? What are you thankful for? Well, I'm thankful for my Switch and my Ninja Turtles. I'm thankful for this. We're like, yeah, buddy, that's awesome. Build that grateful heart, build that foundation. Even if
Right.
it is, that's what a
That's
7-year-old
good.
thinks about. That's
Yeah.
what's important to a 7-year-old. But we had a night a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you're like me with parents, you feel like you're failing every corner you take. And it's like fighting back. They're fighting me back at me on everything I say, et cetera, et cetera. But we had one night where we were still awake and we hear the footsteps run across the house. And our little guy jumped in the bed and he's panicked. And if you know my son, nothing spooks him, nothing rattles him. Like he's a rock, but he was shaken. And we're like, buddy, are you sick? Do you feel bad? Did you have a bad dream? And all he said was, Mommy, Daddy, pray for me. And we're like, okay, buddy, we'll pray. He's like, pray louder, Daddy. Pray louder, Mommy. And we're like, oh, okay. He's like, pray in tongues. And we're like, oh my gosh. Then he started praying in tongues. And we're like, what is going on? Like it was this intense night. But the thing that stuck out to me the most was in this moment of fear. We're not even sure what it was, if it was a dream or if it was just an upset stomach or if there was something that spooked him in his room on the spiritual level. We're not sure. But in this moment, when you feel like a failing parent, this was a moment where in a time of true need for the 7-year-old, his instincts were to run to his parents and pray. And that was such a win for us as parents, because we're like, okay, that foundation is being established where it's like, he's not going to run to the world. He's not going to run to whatever. He's coming to us and for prayer for in a time of need. And as parents, we're slipping off media a little bit, but at the same time, we have to build that foundation so that they navigate this world of constant access. Like, if you get internet access, you can go anywhere and ads and everything. Like, we have to raise our kids to navigate this world because it's, let's be honest, what you saw late night TV on CBC growing up is tame and mild compared to what you have accessible now on YouTube.
Right.
And it's like, how do we can't block our kids. We can't shelter them and bubble them, but we can raise them up to know what's right, what's wrong, that inner discernment to navigate through these junk that's trying to basically catch your attention. And all of it is trying to catch your attention to build a viewership, build followers. And what did you say earlier, Brent, about monetizing on time and on viewership?
Monetizing attention. It's
attention. Exactly.
Attention. Yeah.
And even on YouTube, it used to be how many views did you get? Now they've switched their analytics to your airtime, your runtime, your viewership. So you have a 10-minute video, they've only watched 30 seconds versus 9 minutes. The view means nothing. It's your viewership, the attention time. Yeah. And
I think the important point you made there, Jock, and I think this is a good place to sort of start coming in for a landing, is, and it's probably even more helpful for us to think about our kids in this, or even someone who's listening. We can't avoid this. We can't run away from it. And I'm not serving my kids by, and I'm not opposed to homeschooling or private school or any of that, but I'm not serving my kids if the way that I deal with this is to try to insulate them.
Yeah.
I do think there's a level of protection and timing and all that. And we as parents need to figure that stuff out. But the reality is I have a 12-year-old daughter who's in middle school. She goes to public school. And I have wrestled very hard with sending her to private Christian school. And so far we've kept her, and there may come a time where we decide it's best for her and best for us to move her out. I'm not opposed to it at all. In fact, I'm very open to it. But we have still decided to keep her in there, because guess what? She's going to, whether it's in middle school or high school, or it's when she graduates, she has to live in this world too.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to not shelter her. I need to educate her in how to think. I need to teach her how to think. Like you're teaching, your son how to respond and what to do with stuff that's beyond me, right? You're teaching him how to think. And I've got to, I think for parents out there, or if you're not a parent, just like we all have to take a deep breath, realize some of this stuff for what it is, and then start navigating through it and doing the work of having those conversations.
What better time to do it than when you're actually living with them,
Yeah.
right? Rather than punting it off
Yeah.
to when,
They turn 13, they can go to youth group, and the youth group is going to raise them up with a foundation to make it through their Christianity.
Or 18 and they move out of the house and they're left to navigate these decisions.
Yeah.
And then could have been walking through with them when they were younger, right?
Yeah.
I can't afford my daughter for the first time to learn, like, if the first time she's ever dealt with any type of critical thinking or like critical theory, which that's a whole other conversation we should have sometime. But like, if the first time she deals with that is when she goes to university, I have failed her, because she is going to be overwhelmed with the perceived power of that. And if I haven't given her the tools to build up her theology and her worldview in a way that allows her to take the pieces out and look at it and ask tough questions, like, the whole thing's going to come, and how many parents have dealt with their kids who, as soon as they hit university, they just went hog wild, Christian kids that went nuts because they weren't equipped to deal with the conversations that were coming at them. And for me,
being told no was the only parenting they had, and complete sheltering, and then rebellion strikes. And we all know that's why pastors' kids, unfortunately, there's a bad rap for being a PK. How many times have you heard that? Not that it's the statement. Not that it's a rule, but it's like we all know PKs who in the youth group tend to be the ones that the instigators.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
And that has many layers to it.
I'm trying to hit those conversations with my kids head on, and and each one's different. I have a 12-year-old daughter, so I'm talking to her like about the things she's hearing and steering it. And whether it's like they're obviously every public school is going to be a product of ideologies that are important to the governing authorities. And so right now, there's a lot of things that my daughter's being taught that I don't sign off on. So, when I drop her off at school over the pride flag, crosswalk, I've had those conversations with her. It's like, here's what I think about that. What we're for. I tell her things like, we're Christians, and so here's how we think. It's I'm not for pride. Like, pride is a bad word to us. Pride is the root of sin. And so, but you know what we are for, honey? I say, like, we are for people being treated fairly. We are for people being loved no matter what. We are for no one should be bullied. It should be safe. So I try to help her delineate and go right into the belly of the beast, because you know what? Like, that's not all bad and it's not all good. We actually have to deal with the complexity of reality.
Really good.
And that's hard work, but that's the task of parenting. That's the task of being a believer, is we have to deal with this is complex, and we have to learn how to think and navigate.
Yeah. And it's only getting more complex and more immersive and more interactive and more accessible. And it's just more. It's just supply and demand.
And the ones who don't run away from the conversation will be the ones who actually produce health and produce life. Because again, like, I could run away from a conversation and I might be okay myself, but my kids will suffer because of it, right? They'll be unprepared for it. So if I'm presented with something where I don't know the answer to it, and I go research and find information and find like a godly perspective on it, then I'd be able to sort of help my kids with that, give them that lens and that filter. Then I've created something. Then I've actually done something that has the potential to produce life, months, years, decades down the road.
And if we as parents, or even as individuals, I know we got like single people and people who don't have kids who are listening today, like if we can humbly invite the Lord into this process, he will actually help us. Like, it's not like he's just like given us his Bible and said, hey, figure it out. Like
Yep.
the Holy Spirit is an active agent in this. Like in my parenting, for instance, the only way that the Holy Spirit won't help me is if I'm not engaging, if I disengage.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm engaging and like, God, this is bigger, with fear and trembling, I believe the Holy Spirit is like the X factor in my parenting and in the like having conversations with my daughter or my 10-year-old son that I'm not even able to have at a heart level, but my job as the parent is to, again, just engage. Like you've already done the work with your son, right? He knew my parents know how to pray. I've felt that feeling being around my parents praying. Like that's the stuff we have to engage. And I think the Spirit is the X factor in all this. Like he is, the word is, yes, it's the logos, the written word. It's also the rhema that God is living and moving and active. The word is a lamp to my feet, which means a light to my path. It's moving. And God has the answers for how we can navigate this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he's obviously the big X factor that we need to lean on, but we have to engage. We just can't. The church has got to wake. Let me preach. The church has got to wake up.
Yeah.
Stand up and rise up and open their eyes and open our mouths and not be bullied by the culture, not be bullied by media, not be bullied by our feelings or relationships, but to stand up and say, hey, here's what the word of God has to say, and I'm going to do that. And
No,
I think,
yeah. 100%. And it's, we do need to take a stand. Days of being passive, just kind of consumer Christians are gone. And like, you look at Peter, when he went taken to court for preaching out in the court square, basically they're like, well, we can't kill him. They'll riot, but let's beat him up and forbid him to do it again. And what's he doing the next day? He's back out preaching in the court square. And it sounds, oh, that's old. That's just, no, we're not like that. And it's like, no, there's a boldness there that we need to have, that we need to stand on. And here we are in COVID times where things are locked down and church is illegal, really. And it's like, it's interesting because we're praying for revival in an Acts 2 church and we're praying for all this stuff, but it's like, okay, church is illegal, just like in Acts 2. Like, how as Christians do we respond? How do we navigate forward this? How do we preach the gospel when we don't have a building to go to? What is our faith built on? Listening to a preacher on Sunday morning and then waiting until the next Sunday? No, it's like, it's our responsibility. Our walk with God is our responsibility.
Yeah.
And there's a time to step up. It's 100% agree.
It's here. And I think for us to I think we should take a deep breath and step in and with courage, but also with expectation that like God's behind this more than anything. Like he's allowing this to happen. And we like, this is, if you read Acts 2, things were pretty good at the end of Acts chapter 2. The Holy Spirit fell, 3,000 were added day 1, another couple thousand day 2. And it says like the Christians, it says like everyone spoke well of them and all of their needs were met.
Yeah.
You want Acts to end there.
Yeah, please.
But then
as soon as they go outside, they're mocked and jeered and thrown rocks at.
Well, the next chapter is, and then a wave of persecution happened. What, so on the one hand, the Christians are like, oh crap, how do we escape this? But that's not actually the purpose of God. And it was actually, through martyrdom, more people became Christians. And not only that mobilized the church. It got them out of Jerusalem. It made them go to Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And there's a mobilization that's happening right now. And it's not geographical, it's ideological, and it's happening, and it's digital, and it's happening all over the world. And this is the exciting thing is like, I do believe there's going to be let's just get weird for a minute. I do believe in an end times harvest. No, not that kind of weird. Weird. I'm saying like, I do think there is an end time harvest coming. And I do think that if I look at the cultural climate, I think that it's laid out for it, because this is the first time ever that there's more fractures and fragments, but there's also more potential for unity. And our kids there's a generation growing up that's like, I need something authoritative because I don't trust the authorities that I've tried. Like they've all burned me, the school systems burned me, and the government's burned me, and Twitter's burned me. And like, I think it's just a rising tide of people saying, give me an authority that's older than me and long lasting and enduring and powerful. And I think this is the moment for the church to rise up and say, hey, this thing we're standing on, it was here before we were here, and it'll be here after, you know?
And it's not just an ideology either. It's results, it's fruit, it's actually power, it's transformation, right? Like, how many of us have, like, gosh, like over and over, you know, in that we hear stories of absolute things that you just can't make up, right? Like lives absolutely turned on their head, headed for destruction and death, right? Flipped around, and now it's life. And just like there's healed lives, there's restored relationships, there's healed bodies, there's healed minds, there's all of these things, right? And it's like we don't have to get into all the nuances of what that is, but it's absolutely something that is like, if you will open up your heart and let the gospel in, right? I don't know if anybody's who's listening is not a believer, but if you let the gospel in, if you let Jesus come in, he absolutely transforms and changes everything about you, your outlook on life, the details of the life. He cares, he's with you. And so it's just not just, there is a, I don't know, I kind of use ideology as a bad word, but it is an ideology, but it's way more than that. The gospel is way bigger than just an ideology. Yeah.
Well, let's bring it in for a landing here, guys. This has been a super just interesting conversation. I think we should do it again. I think we should probably have round 2.
Can we go off topic here for a second?
Yep.
Jock,
I was just going to make sure that Jock told everybody that make sure you get your news at Fox News. And
it's funny, since you mentioned Fox, I tend to watch them all because I want to know what all angles are being said, and then I dig into a story. Try to do the math, triangulate where exactly the truth is.
I read them all.
It's good. It's healthy.
Yeah, and I think it was Steve Crowder, a conservative commentary, that stand-up comedian as well. But he's like, the difference is with Fox News, their stances were a conservative, right-standing news outlet. We support Trump, and the difference with CNN is they establish themselves as we are unbiased, down the center news. We don't take one leaning or the other. We just bring straight news. But if you watch it, it's obvious.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I don't care what your stance is. Just be honest about where you're coming from. And like with Fox, it's like, you know, they're conservative. You know, they support Trump, but they don't try to hide it. Don't come at me saying you're unbiased, but then everything you show is completely biased. And that's why I love getting into the commentary people in the world. Again, that's a rabbit hole that save for another topic. But
I mean, I think it is safe to say like CNN is unbelievable. Like they're gonna, I guess they're gonna stab you in the back with their left ideology, and Fox News will get you right between the eyes with
it's a right hook.
You're leading. You're there. That's probably the extremes, and then, you know, as far as the mainstream ones, and then you kind of start doing the math. But honestly, I don't trust any of them.
No. I enjoy them all, but I don't trust any of them. But because I think there's still probably going to be some viewers who are still kind of like, nope, these guys are actually the most honest of them all. But like with CNN, just recently, this is one that, did you guys see Trump walk down that ramp? Have you seen that story?
Oh,
I heard a little bit about it.
Yeah. So it's basically he's walking down this steel ramp, and he's walking slowly. The dude's 70, and he's wearing leather bottom shoes walking down a steel ramp. And so he's like shuffling down, and then 4 feet by the end, he just kind of runs down. That is what made news headlines that day. Was he's losing his mind, his head's going, he's, you know, cognitive abilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But literally the day before, or within hours before, within the week, he had signed, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen or whatever the number was, bills fighting sex trafficking. And there was silence on the left media, nothing about it. But he slowly walks down a ramp. It's 3 days of headlines based on how incompetent the leader is. And like, these are the little things. I'm going to my end note is, don't believe the news, but like, listen to what they're saying. See if there's contradictories. Like, what's important, what's actually going on, and what are they focusing on? Are they focusing on the truth or discrediting someone's character? And I mean, that's where it comes back to filtering through the word. It's like, people are God's creation. We have to look at it from that point. If all you're taking in is someone discrediting and belittling and tearing people down to something down, chances are you're not hearing truth, but you're definitely not hearing gospel, and it's definitely not going to be edifying to you or the body or your well-being.
Absolutely. Well,
I need to say something.
Okay,
I need to hear it.
I've got the final song on here, but bring it.
Jock, it's fine. Jock, you've changed my life. Coffee.
Today or coffee.
Coffee is a thing in my life, and my wife hates it.
I remember that night.
It was anyway.
That'll be another podcast. The joys of coffee.
Yeah, that's my parting thought.
We should do the coffee snob. You should do coffee snobbery for the layperson, for dummies, for people like me.
I would love to do a full session on.
Jock has he basically that like the Walter White Breaking Bad beakers and stuff. He opens up a big steel case and like brings it out. Oh, it's crazy, man. It's
I have a bomb-proof flight case for all my coffee gear for when I travel. It's no joke.
He's a chemist. He even has the apron like Walter White.
Yep.
Whitey.
And I make it in my underwear. I do not wear clothes when I make coffee. It's essential. There can be zero contamination from outside fabrics.
Yep.
You can never be too cautious when you make good coffee.
And notice this last 30 seconds discredit everything I said over the last hour. The power of the media, people.
That was fun.
Thank you for having us on.
We'll do a round 2 of this discussion because I think we just started scratching the surface. Hey, thanks for tuning in today, everybody. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jock and Anthony. Look, if you haven't already, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or iTunes or Spotify or wherever it is you listen. And do me one better. I'd love it if you'd leave a good review and share this for someone else to enjoy. We'll see you next time.